War. War never changes. However, war is always changing. That was the state of the affairs of the Cold War. The United States and Soviet Union held incredible power on the global stage. The question that is most important to this period is how did the rivalry between the Cold War superpowers threaten world peace during the Cold War? First and foremost, one must understand the difference between capitalism and communism and how it divided the world into three worlds. The first world, capitalist, the second world, communist, and the third world, neutral. Alright boys, good work today. It's like you're getting your pay's worth. You?
What? This is so little.
Why does he get paid?
Developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, communism was a powerful tool in sculpting the Soviet Union. The original concept of communism was based off of the fact that people needed each other and everybody needs to work together equally in order to achieve greater things. This idea was misconstrued by the Soviet leaders to the point where all property was owned by the state. The wealth would have been evenly distributed and free enterprise was banned under a totalitarian state.
Wow, looks like my 7 companies made me $150 billion richer today. Gotta love capitalism.
Contrasting the harsh stipulations of communism was the competitive freedom of capitalism, where not everyone has the same amount of things because some use their abilities better. Capitalism pairs with a democratic government, where property is privately owned and individuals focus on their own progress in life. The first steps of the Cold War was taken by the United States through President Harry S. Truman on March 12, 1947. The United States has received from the Greek government an urgent appeal for financial and economic assistance. Greece is in a desperate need of financial and economic assistance to enable it to resume purchases of food, clothing, fuel, and seeds. The very existence of the Greek state is today threatened by terrorists of several thousand armed men, led by communists, who defy the government's authority. Greece must have assistance if it is to become a self-supporting and self-respecting democracy. The United States must supply this assistance. No other nation is willing and able to provide the necessary support for a democratic Greek government. The Truman Doctrine was a foreign policy for the United States and was used to contain the spread of communism during the Cold War. By assisting Turkey and Greece, the Soviet plans would be hampered. Truman used the method of containing the problem to stop its growth before removing its entirety. If the US were to allow Greece and Turkey to fall under the influence of communism, neighboring countries would be in danger, and would quickly spread to Western Europe and ultimately to the United States. Truman wanted to go on the offensive against communism so that capitalism and democracy would prosper instead. The doctrine led to the development of NATO in 1949, a military alliance that stands to this day. The first step for economic assistance to Greece was proposed by Secretary of State George C. Marshall in June of 1947.
We want to fund Greece.
No, get out.
The Marshall Plan was intended to be good news for Europe, especially after the severe losses from the years of conflict during World War II. Industrial areas in Germany, Italy, Poland, Belgium, and much more laid in shambles. The only major power left standing with the least damage taken was the United States. Russia rejected this plan because it meant that the US was providing economic assistance to Germany, whom Russia recently fought with. Russia demanded that they oversaw the amount of money that was to be given to Germany, but they were rejected. After this, Russia refused to participate in the Marshall Plan, convinced several other Eastern European allies to reject the plan, and claimed that the United States was interfering with the domestic affairs of other countries. The US saw Russia's actions as an attempt to isolate Eastern Europe from the West and enforce communism and totalitarianism in its area. Russia's actions and the US's reaction intensified tensions of the Cold War. Anti-colonialist sentiment was strong during the Cold War, and power vacuums created by secession would give the Soviet Union and United States a place to vie for power.
I like this whole layout. I'm gonna buy this land. You guys work for me now. Exactly. Yes.
Hungry?
You gonna make me food? It's great.
Mang quần áo gì vậy?
After the First World War, many colonial subjects in Asia, Africa, and Latin America were transferred from one power to another.
The Queen watches a march past of 2,400 colonial and Commonwealth troops, all of whom took part in the great coronation procession.
Eventually, these colonies would gain their independence from their colonial powers, but each through different means. The Philippines, India, and Pakistan were no longer under the direct control of the US and Britain respectively. But the eventual secession of Bangladesh would not end without conflict. Countries in Indochina would fight back against their French overlords and gain freedom from them through war. Africa and Latin America would also be experiencing different methods of secession, from the fighting in Algeria to economic freedoms in Cuba.
Finally, the French took drastic measures. The rebels had the backing of many fellow Muslims. They moved unnoticed in the midst of the civilian population.
The Cold War gets hot in the East as the two dominant powers in the world would clash in these countries through proxy wars.
Hey Sergeant, I have a question.
What is it, Private?
What are we doing here?
To provide recon for the boys back at base.
I was given a gun, but I still don't understand why we're here.
There is no other answer to eradicating the enemies. We must stop the spread of communism from other Eastern countries. Stop them from dividing it. That is why we're here.
Countries such as Korea, Vietnam, China, and Cuba would be the battlegrounds for the United States and Soviet Union to one-up one another. China was the stepping stone from Russia into Southeast Asia, and a communist government under Mao Zedong would take hold there. Korea and Vietnam would be divided between the communist and capitalist powers during the respective wars, but only Korea would remain split. Vietnam would fall to communist powers and remain communist to modern day. Cuba would be the setting for the Cuban Missile Crisis and the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. This would put communist dictator Fidel Castro to power in Cuba. Fear of communism grew rampant in the States as Eastern countries started falling like dominoes to the red tide.
How do you do on the back? Please just
Good morning, class. Have a seat, please. So today, we are going to be talking about communism. But first, we shall do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Why weren't you saying it?
Are you disrespecting the country? Are you a commie?
Get him!
Whoa, 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 you two over there, stop it! Stop that! What are you doing? Wait a minute. What's this?
Now, this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This, my good friends, is an American issue.
As the Cold War between Soviet Union and United States intensified in the late 1940s and early 1950s, hysteria over the perceived threat posed by communists in the US became known as the Red Scare. Americans felt the effects of the Red Scare on a personal level, and thousands of alleged communist sympathizers saw their lives disrupted. People were hounded by law enforcement, alienated from friends and family, and fired from their jobs. Government loyalty bonds investigated millions of federal employees, asking what books and magazines they read. More than 39 states required teachers and other public employees to take loyalty oaths. Communism was looked at as a real threat to social order that had to be eliminated. As a result, the Red Scare led to a range of actions that had profound and enduring effect on US government and society. The arms race that the US and Russia participated in would undeniably be one of the most important facets of the Cold War. Nuclear weapons were created, tested, and sold alongside other military equipment. Nuclear war was also a possibility, and it was obvious to everyone how devastating a war between the two nuclear powers would be. The world would have ceased to exist had either country felt desperate enough to use their weapons. From 1989 to 2013, the majority of nuclear weapons that the superpowers once owned was slowly disarmed to about 20% of the original amount.
Nuclear weapons disposal complete.
The Cold War was a period of heightened tension between two ideologically different beliefs. The competition between communism and capitalism affected both the political and militaristic states of nations. Countries rose and fell during this time period, and the effects of the Cold War are still felt today.